Christmas morning. I walked into my childhood home with my arms full of gifts for everyone. My mother stepped into the hallway, blocked my path, and said flatly, "Don't go upstairs. Your room belongs to Gianna now. She needs stability. You'll sleep on the air mattress in the basement." I stood there frozen, holding wrapped presents for people who had already forgotten me. From upstairs, I could hear my cousin Gianna laughing as she tore my old photos off the wall and redecorated the room I grew up in. And that wasn't even the worst part of what happened that Christmas. My name is Corinne Deluca. I'm 34 years old. I work as a property assessor for the county. It's not glamorous, it's not flashy, but I understand real estate law better than anyone in my family ever realized. I grew up as the quiet, dependable middle child in a loud Italian-American family in central New Jersey. My parents always orbited around two people: my older brother Nico, the one they praised at every turn, the one whose name came up first in every conversation, and my younger cousin Gianna, who was taken in after her mother's divorce and treated like a fragile princess from that day forward. I was the workhorse. I drove my grandmother to dialysis 3 times a week for 2 years. I co-signed my parents' second mortgage when their credit tanked so badly, no bank would touch them. I paid for half of the kitchen renovation they showed off to every neighbor, but never once thanked me for. I wasn't the loud one or the pretty one. And I wasn't the one they bragged about at Sunday dinner. But I had something none of them expected. I understood exactly what that house was worth, and I knew whose name was actually on the deed. If you've ever been the one your family leans on, but never celebrates, the one who gives and somehow still ends up on the air mattress, you already know what this story is about. Subscribe so you don't miss what happened next. And if you feel this in your gut, click hype right now. Christmas Day continued, and I swallowed my pride like a dry pill. I carried my bag down to the basement and set up the air mattress next to the water heater. The floor was cold concrete. The ceiling was low. I could hear every footstep above me, every burst of laughter, every clink of a wine glass. They didn't come to check on me. Not once. At dinner, all 12 of us sat around the big table, and my mother stood up with that look she gets when she's about to perform. And she announced that Gianna would be moving into the house permanently, into my old bedroom, because, and I quote, "Gianna's been through so much, and family takes care of family." I kept my voice calm. I asked, "And what about my things? My grandmother's sewing desk is still in that room." My father waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. "You're 34, Corinne. You don't need a room here anymore. Gianna's only 26. She's still figuring life out." Gianna smirked at me from across the table. "I already moved your little desk into the garage. It was taking up space." My brother Nico laughed. "Come on, Cor. It's not like you were using it. You barely visit." I barely visit because I work weekends to cover the mortgage payments I co-signed for them, but I didn't say that. I pressed my lips together and said nothing. Then came the real gut punch. My mother slid an envelope across the table to me, and inside was a typed letter asking me to officially remove my name from the house's mortgage cosign so they could refinance and add Gianna to the household for tax purposes. They wanted my financial responsibility erased so they could make Gianna a legal resident, but they didn't realize what I already knew about the property's actual ownership. I stared at that letter for a long time. My hands didn't shake. I folded it neatly, tucked it into my coat pocket, and said, "I'll look it over." Nobody noticed how still I'd gone. That night, alone in the basement on that sagging air mattress, I pulled out my phone and opened the county property records database. The same database I use for work every single day. I typed in my family's address. The result loaded. And my breath caught in my throat, because the name on the deed was not my father's. It was my late grandmother's. The title had never been transferred. The house didn't legally belong to my parents at all. The week after Christmas, I went back to my apartment and tried to breathe normally again, but my phone wouldn't let me. The family group chat exploded with photos of Gianna's new room makeover. There were pictures of fresh paint, new curtains, string lights on the ceiling. My grandmother's antique sewing desk had been shoved into the unheated garage like a piece of junk. My childhood photo wall, Every picture I'd ever hung had been painted over in blush pink. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. I texted my mother directly and asked about the sewing desk. She responded, "It's just old furniture, Corinne. Stop being dramatic." That desk was promised to me by my grandmother before she passed. I sat beside her hospital bed, and she held my hand and told me she wanted me to have it. It was the only thing I ever asked for from her estate. It meant everything to me, and to my mother, it was just old furniture. 2 weeks later, my father called. Not to apologize, not to check in. And he called to pressure me into signing the mortgage release paperwork immediately. He was aggressive, impatient, his voice sharp like I owed him something. He told me the refinance window was closing soon. When I asked for more time, he snapped. "You know what your problem is? You always make everything about you. We raised you, fed you, and this is how you repay us?" I held the phone away from my ear and let him finish. Then I went back through the paperwork a second time, more carefully. Oh, and that's when I saw it. The refinance wasn't just a rate adjustment. It would actually convert the home into collateral for a $90,000 home equity line of credit, money my parents planned to use to open a catering business with Gianna. They needed my name off the mortgage to make it happen cleanly. They weren't just replacing me. They were using the house my grandmother built to bankroll Gianna's dream, while I was still legally liable on the original loan. And then came Sunday dinner at the end of January. I showed up trying to keep the peace, trying to be the bigger person one more time. Mid-meal, Gianna leaned back in her chair, looked around the table, and said casually, "I'm basically the daughter your parents always wanted." Several relatives chuckled. My mother didn't correct her. She smiled warmly and squeezed Gianna's hand. Nico piled on. "Gianna actually shows up. Gianna doesn't make everything complicated." I set down my fork. And I excused myself quietly. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. Engine off, hands on the wheel, staring at the house I helped pay for while they laughed inside without me. But something shifted that night. Something cold and clear locked into place behind my ribs. I didn't cry. I opened the county records app on my phone and started reading probate law statutes. I screenshotted everything. They thought silence meant I accepted it. They mistook my patience for surrender, but I wasn't sitting there broken. I was sitting there calculating. What none of them knew, not my parents, not Nico, and definitely not Gianna, was that my grandmother had done something extraordinary before she died. My grandmother, Gianna Deluca, had been quietly worried for years that the family would fight over the house. She didn't trust her own son with money. She'd watched my father blow through 2 small business loans and borrow against everything he touched. She saw the pattern. So 6 months before she passed, Lucia visited an estate attorney. She sat in his office and she drafted a transfer on death deed, a legal instrument that bypassed probate entirely. The deed named one sole beneficiary, me. The document was filed with the county recorder's office. It was public record. It had been sitting there for 3 years, visible to anyone who cared enough to look. Nobody in the family ever checked because nobody in the family understood property law. I found it during my Christmas night search in that basement. I verified it twice, then a third time. My grandmother left me the house. Not my father, not my mother, not Nico, not Gianna. Me, the granddaughter who drove her to dialysis in the rain, the one who sat with her on the porch when everyone else was too busy. She saw me. She always saw me. And I held that knowledge in my chest like a lit match, and I waited for the exact right moment to strike it. The first person I called was Arthur Modena. He was my grandmother's old estate attorney, now semi-retired but still sharp as a blade. He was in his late 60s, had a dry humor that could cut glass, and he was deeply loyal to Lucia's memory. I visited his small office above a barber shop in our old neighborhood. The smell of aftershave and old paper filled the stairwell. I sat down across from him and placed the deed printout on his desk. Arthur adjusted his glasses. He read it slowly, then he smiled. Not a big smile, a slow, quiet one. "Your grandmother sat right where you're sitting," he said. "She told me, Corinne is the only one in this family who earns what she has. The deed is ironclad. You own that house, kid. Arthur agreed to represent me, not for the money, but for Lucia. She was the most decent person I ever worked for, he said. She'd haunt me if I let this slide. He advised me to wait. Let the family proceed with their refinance attempt. Let them walk right into the bank and file their application. Let the title search happen naturally. The bank will reject it instantly, he said, and then the dominoes fall on their own. Meanwhile, the family's arrogance escalated without me there to absorb it. Gianna posted photos online calling it her home. Nico started talking about converting the garage into a catering prep kitchen. My parents booked a contractor for renovations, spending money they didn't have yet, counting on a home equity line they were never going to get. I watched it all unfold in silence. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't attend the next 2 Sunday dinners. My mother texted me, "You're being selfish and childish. Gianna asked where you were. At least she cares." I read the message. I set the phone down. Let them build their castle. I held the ground beneath it. 3 days before Easter, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice was shaking, but not from sadness, from rage. The bank had rejected their refinance application. The title search had revealed the transfer on death deed. The house belonged to me. He was screaming into the phone, demanding I fix it, calling it a mistake and a forgery. I let him burn through his fury. And then I said calmly, "It's not a mistake, Dad. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. And so do I." Easter Sunday arrived, our family's annual gathering, a big catered backyard event with extended relatives, neighbors, and family friends. Roughly 40 people spread across the yard my grandmother had planted flowers in 20 years ago. I walked through the gate of the house that was now legally mine. I was composed. I was wearing my grandmother's gold chain around my neck. I could feel it warm against my skin. The tension was suffocating from the moment I arrived. My parents wouldn't look at me. Gianna was moving between clusters of relatives, loudly telling anyone who would listen that Corinne had forged paperwork to steal the family home. Then, Arthur Medina walked through the backyard gate. He wasn't on the guest list. He moved through the crowd in his old gray suit, carrying a leather folder under his arm. Conversations stopped as people noticed him. And I stood up from my chair and addressed the table. I didn't yell. My voice was steady and clear as glass. For 3 years, I co-signed the mortgage on this house. I paid when they couldn't. I drove Grandma Lucia to every appointment. I held her hand the night she died, and at Christmas, I was put in the basement so my cousin could have my room. Arthur opened the leather folder. He passed out photocopies of the filed transfer on death deed, the county recorder's stamp, and Lucia's notarized letter of intent. In her own handwriting, my grandmother had written, "I leave this home to Corinne because she is the only one who loved me without needing a reason." Silence. Total silence across 40 people. The only sound was the wind pulling at the tablecloth. Gianna's face went white. She stammered, That can't be real." Arthur responded dryly, "It's filed with the county. It's been public record for 3 years. Anyone could have looked it up." I turned to my parents. My father's eyes were wet. My mother was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had gone pale. My voice finally broke, just barely. "I'm not selling it. I'm not giving it away. But I need you to hear me. Really hear me, for the first time in my life. I was never the problem in this family. I was the answer, and you threw me in the basement." I didn't evict my parents. That was never what this was about. I had a formal lease agreement drawn up. Fair rent, 12-month terms, my name on every document. The power dynamic in that house was permanently and completely reversed. Gianna moved out within 2 weeks. She didn't say goodbye. Nico called me about a month later. For the first time in my entire life, he said, "I'm sorry, Cor. I didn't see it." I accepted his apology, but I told him trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with actions. My mother eventually wrote me a 4-page handwritten letter. It was the most honest thing she's ever produced. Full of things she should have said years ago. It wasn't enough to fix everything. But it was a start. I restored my grandmother's sewing desk to its original place by the upstairs window. I sit there on quiet mornings now with my coffee, running my hand across the wood she touched 1,000 times. My grandmother couldn't protect me while she was alive. So she built a shield out of ink and paper and filed it with the county. Love doesn't always look like a hug. Sometimes it looks like a deed. If you've ever been the one your family depended on, but never respected. The one who paid the bills, but got the basement. I want to hear from you. Your story matters. Drop it in the comments below. And if you've ever been saved by someone who loved you quietly, from a distance, tell us about them too. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Every week on this channel, we tell the stories nobody else will. The ones about the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who kept the whole family standing and never got a thank you. If that's you, you're home now. Subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it tonight. We'll see you in the next one.